problem of balancing national interest versus multilateral interest. How do states balance their national interest with those of multilateral frameworks? So that is going to be the key challenge for most states and including India. So when we talk about the Indo-Pacific, it is a vast region. Um, uh, it consists of of so many players, and across the Indo-Pacific, across the Indian Ocean. Therefore, from a constructivist perspective, it is representing a kind of a shared value, a common identity. And India has sought to engage with countries in the Indo-Pacific region on a bilateral and multilateral basis. Um, Perhaps the increasing belligerence of China has increased um, the role of the West and increased the challenges for New Delhi. Um, the problem is that India does not view the Indo-Pacific region from a security paradigm alone. And India is very keen to pursue and protect its national interest as well as its strategic autonomy. Uh, so therefore, um, India is going to face a peculiar kind of challenge that while it is part of a multilateral framework called Quad, and it has close relationship with the West, um, it is uh, it is going to be a major problem about how India balances its interests with all the players. So, what are the priorities and imperatives for New Delhi? Launched the Look East policy in the early 1990s, and which was transformed in the Act East policy. Uh, Now, India is also looking at not only Act East, but also Act Fast. We are talking about a greater Indo-Pacific framework. Um, this region is important because it represents 65% of the world's population, 62% of the global GDP, 46.5% of the world's commerce trade happens in this part of the country, this part of the globe. So, according to the government of India, as much as 95% of India's commerce and 83% of its energy requirements pass through the Indo-Pacific region. So therefore, at the heart of the Indo-Pacific region is economically very important for India. India has sought to engage with the countries of Southeast Asia on a bilateral level as well as through multilateral institutions. If we talk about multilateralism in the Indo-Pacific, India's engagement, India has got involved through the ASEAN. There are several frameworks within the ASEAN-led frameworks, the East Asia Summit, the ASEAN Regional Forum, the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, plus the expanded ASEAN Maritime Forum. So the ASEAN is at the heart of the Indo-Pacific. But the players as well, the BIMSTEC, the Mekong-Ganga Cooperation, but of course, it has met with certain kind of challenges. Now, India's latest strategy of engaging with the greater Indo-Pacific region is through the Quad. India's trade with Japan, Australia, Washington has reached new levels. India is soon going to be the world's. India is probably the fifth largest economy in the world, and it is soon going to be the third largest economy in the world. So therefore, India is too important to be ignored. And India is realizing this kind of sweet spot. It is in the sweet spot because of its demography, because of its economic position, and because of its strategic location. So therefore, when we talk about multilateralism in the Indo-Pacific and we talk about India's role, we are talking about 7 pillars: maritime security, maritime economy, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, disaster risk and reduction management, science, technology and academic cooperation, trade, connectivity and maritime transport. There is of course a 2+2 ministerial framework dialogue with Australia, Japan, and the United States. Uh, of course, you also have the trilateral kind of Australia, Japan, India initiative. Uh, you have also multilateral naval exercises that are taking place, the Malabar to 2022, and India is increasingly cooperating with navies of Japan, Australia, and USA, and etc. So there is a clear, visible challenge of China, and if we look at the national security strategy, it clearly says that China is the only competitor which has the intent to reshape the international order. Japan has clearly identified China as its main challenge. For Australia too, there's growing tensions between India and China. The incidents of the Galwan Valley has completely derailed India-China relations. Um, uh, it cannot be business as usual. Um, so therefore, China is seen as a major threat. However, in spite of seeing China as a major threat, India is trying to walk the fine line. It is trying to do the balancing act. India is very uncomfortable identifying China very clearly as the key challenge in the Indo-Pacific. India is not yet taken a very clear stand on the issue of independence of Taiwan or its support for pro-democracy in Hong Kong. So India has taken a very kind of nuanced approach to the Indo-Pacific. Therefore, the question is that why has it done so? For the West, India is seen as a natural partner. It's seen as a natural partner because it's democracy, value. But again, India's somewhere down the line, there is a kind of a trust deficit which India and the West. There, India and the West do not have any kind of the so-called natural relationship has become more transactional in nature. Even the war in Ukraine has created a major problem for Indian foreign policy and its balancing act. But what India has done very calculatively, it has moved from multilateralism and it has moved towards strengthening of bilateral relations in the Indo-Pacific. Relations with Malaysia have become stronger. Relations with Japan have become stronger. So from multilateralism, we are now increasingly moving towards more of a kind of a strengthening of bilateral relationship with Vietnam, with Malaysia, with Indonesia. So we are trying to, India is trying to just, you talk multilateralism, but you strengthen your bilateral relations first.
Dr. Subhajit Kanwar, can you just summarize the things? Just in next 2 minutes, can you summarize the things, please?
Can you summarize the things? Okay, sir. So therefore, we are now moving towards. So the question is, how should India view the Indo-Pacific? Because largely we see the act part of the greater kind of Indo-Pacific framework. Now, if from a Northeast, I am from the Northeast, so therefore, if you ask from a Northeastern perspective, I think the key to the Act East policy and the greater East Asian countries is Myanmar. So India has to solve the Myanmar kind of problem. Either it has to support the pro-democracy movement, or it has to go along with the junta in Myanmar. And the question is again of China. So how are we going to deal with the Myanmar-China connection? That is a bigger problem. Therefore, to conclude, as I don't have too much time, the West has realized that India and the West have a trust deficit. India does not want to jeopardize its relationship with India is doing a quite balancing act with China. It's trying to meet whatever challenges it throws up across the line of control, line of actual control. Therefore, in my last part of my slide is it is safe to assume that India's 2023 leadership of G20 and SCO will be fraught with difficulties because India is not only holding the G20 summit in September, but it will be a major challenge if the West, suppose decides not to attend the G20 summit or is uncomfortable with Russia coming to G20 summit in September. India's of SEO is again creating lots of problems. So India's balancing act has to be at the right, it has to be at the through a right kind of, it has to adopt a right approach to balancing all kind of interests. So thank you all. So I'll keep.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Subrajit Kunwar, for joining online. We are taking the advantage of technology. Thank you, sir, for joining with us. If Mr. Arjun Chatterjee, if he's ready online, then we can take his presentation also. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, now we can call Mr. Arjun Chatterjee, PhD scholar from Hong Kong Baptist University.
Hello. I'm audible, right?
Yeah, you are audible and visible both. No problem. Please carry on.
Great. And visible is. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm starting. Is this a fine time to start? How much time do I have? So that I'll try and restrict myself within that time.
Yeah, just please try to summarize the things in 10 minutes.
I'm following the chat box.
Yeah.
10 minutes. Great. Okay. Thank you, Jadavpur University, International Relations, JIR, and the British Deputy High Commission, Kolkata, for this opportunity. Greetings from Hong Kong. And I know this is a spring afternoon. You must have had a long day. I will try not to take you through all of it at a greater depth. But I'll go to the first slide once before before we go and move into the second slide, which is I primarily focus on intellectual capital. And by that, I clearly mean how the two countries can blend and can get creative minds, intellectual minds come together and create something meaningful. And now, going to the next slide, before I go into, I'm supposed to talk about the book. I will not be disclosing everything. These days, people hardly read books. But if you do get a chance, I'm sure there are other authors who have written better chapters than I have. But do grab a copy of that and find out what we have intended to do. I had a opportunity came to me first, which I'll share with you at the very end of my presentation. So that's more or less the pictorial depiction of the region that we have. We're talking about the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. What is key to that is an 86.63% literacy rate and the sex ratio of 876, and that's Census 2011 data. A couple of two other points is it's very close to Myanmar. People who deal with international relations, you know how the Rohingya crisis has been, it was flaring, it's still now brewing, and there's no solution to it yet. Also, it's 90 nautical miles from the Indonesian archipelago, and we will try and talk about choke points. I'm sure previous presenters and authors have dealt with it at greater length. I will not go at and how the string of pearls or the necklace of diamond strategies work around the region, but I'll try and focus on two key areas, which takes me to my next slide. And that is because this is, we'll go to the next slide, please, which is, we're looking at how UK and India can collaborate. So who better than an Indian in the UK, in one of UK's topmost universities, University of Cambridge, has come up with something. I'm talking about Professor Partha Dasgupta, who talks about inclusive wealth. You will see on the slide, there's a quote from the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and that I found that very sarcastic, but I'm sure the British government has done good doing that, which is the United Kingdom Treasury approached Professor Dasgupta in 2019 to carry out a review of the economics of biodiversity, the first time a finance ministry is believed to have commissioned such a study. And that's something, that's a key takeaway for many governments across the world. It's good that the UK government did it, and it came up with this economics and biodiversity review. I'm sure many of you have gone through it. It categorically talks about social capital, human capital, and natural capital. And more or less, we are more used to talking about GDP as an indicator our nation does well and not so well. But I think the time has come when we start talking about inclusive wealth as well, where we try and put in our investments on human capital, the natural capital, and the social capital. It is nothing new. In fact, it is something that the UN had already accepted, I think, in 2015 in the Sendai Framework Disaster Risk Reduction. It becomes all the more pertinent because we're dealing with a region which has suffered natural calamities and disasters over a period of time. 2004, no one can forget. I often tell my students in my past life, I was a journalist, and one of my first assignments was to go and cover the 2004 tsunami. Indonesia is the most, it suffered the most. India did suffer the less. We'll go to the next slide, and so it becomes imperative that anything that we discuss about Andaman and Nicobar Islands, we keep climate at the core of it, we keep biodiversity at the core of it, and we see how things can be worked around that framework. Now, just as a slight digression to the audience out here, I can't see you, I'm very sorry, I cannot understand the demography of this audience, but I'm sure there are scholars, there are parents, there are young teachers. Just for once imagine that you don't have to go to the bank and get loans and go to the Western countries, which is now quite a trend. I am very much rooted in Kolkata, so I know what it is like there. People are going UK, people who can afford to, with brackets. How about sending your kid, sending your child, sending your siblings or somewhere which is not very far away, which is pretty much within India? You don't have to have a visa for that. And it's a place of pristine beauty, which is not very expensive as well. That is a thought that kept coming back to my mind as I was trying to do research for this book chapter. And I'm talking to you from Hong Kong, and I'm looking at this place since last August 2022. So a thought that often keeps coming back to me is whatever Hong Kong is to China, keeping aside the political conundrums, and whatever Dubai is to UAE, we may not have to become an exact parallel of that, but we can try and figure out if we can be aspirational and make it bigger. So those are the few points that I have for you. I'm not going to read them out. I'm sure it's visible to everyone. But some of the key points that I want to focus on are innovative economy, getting more technology, getting the best of minds from the world, getting the most prestigious universities have their offshore campuses in India. This may sound a bit pro-government. I'm sorry if I'm hurting emotions, but I have nothing to do with governments here. The new educational policy, the NEP, it invites all these foreign companies, foreign universities to come and have offshore campuses. And now, the counter to that is the opposition in India always asks, why would they invest in India? Now, here in China, most of the Western universities, American universities, have a Chinese campus. Very recently, I think 3-4 weeks back, it was in the Indian media that a few of the top universities in the West are trying to build campuses here. It was accepted, the news was partially embraced, partially rejected. My point is, beyond the political debates that will continue forever in India, we're very politically conscious and aware. Why can't we have these prestigious universities come and build their campuses. We go to the next slide, and I will quickly take you through what are, I mean, I've just started discussing it. Can you move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Before I talk about what my chapter tries and pushes for is, I think previous scholars have mentioned, is what are the possible threats and opportunities, possible threats for instability, possible threats for conflict, and in the region, in the Indian Ocean region, IOR, and the Indo-Pacific. I'm sure the British government understands it very well. Yes, we have Quad, but I also have something to share with you, and that is, we are already the most populous country on the planet. While governments are saying we are moving at a rapid speed, I am not sure of the data yet, but I can assure you that historically, being two civilization states living side by side, and I'm talking about India and China, with 5,000-year history of the Himalayas, it is imperative to notice that until 1962, we did not fight a war that is, in a century, a 19th century, which costed lives of almost 187 million people across the globe who all died due to conflict. And you can start it from any of those wars: First World, Second World War, Gulf War, Balkans, and wars of independence. So that's another debate altogether. So conflict becomes a major concern when it comes to regional stability. We go to the next slide, please. I know I have 2-3 minutes. Okay, I'll wrap it up fast. So my book chapter tries and focuses on some key areas, which is building infrastructure, which is the security concern, and maritime exercises and the collaborations in the IOR. We already participated in RIMPAC. That has not been taken well by the Chinese, but doesn't matter. I mean, we have our regional arrangements and our exercises which align with our geopolitical aspirations. So they should be. I also talk about ANI's potential of being a paradise for tourism. I mean, we have hardly treated it better than remotely traveling to that place, which is a volatile part of India also. And then I talk about a state-of-the-art research institute and top UK universities coming together. I mean, the UK government knows very well that Indian students are one of those bulk of students that go to UK regularly every year. And it's also a threat for them because they're not very, I mean, I should choose the words carefully, they're a bit cautious about giving the visas. Well, if you have an offshore campus here in India, that probably is taken care of, as well as the fact is my Indian students are citizens who get some of the best faculty members and research opportunities to take the capital forward. Moving on to my next slide quickly. So this is where mostly I was discussing about how we can invest in the intellectual capital. We need to remember a couple of things. You know, the 5G connectivity has been, the underwater cables from the Chennai to ANI has been established. The government is talking about 10,000 crore investment, so no air connectivity and all of that. But apart from that, it is also about trying to build a workforce which can, COVID has taught us, right? COVID has taught us that we can work from anywhere if there's fantastic connectivity. So why can't we be aspirational is something that I'm trying in this chapter. My next slide, please. And I talk about something which is, my research interests are around conflict, around, so if it's about prosperity and stability of ANI, we have to invest in intellectual capital which works as a deterrence to conflict. If you have a prosperous island chain which can imbibe the globe and makes the world feel for it and the world ready for it, and parallelly we also become ready for this world and embrace them, then probably better trade and commerce, better security infrastructure helps in prosperity and stability. And if you have the UK and India doing this together in a very crucial island chain, which is very close to the Strait of Malacca, I'm sure somebody must have mentioned that the Chinese oil trade route, 50% of their oil goes through that. So if we have some surveillance, some vigilance, some maritime exercises, then a strong ANI would obviously mean a strong India. It will mean a lot for UK-India partnerships. I hope the FTA comes up well. And I'll go to my final slide, which is a kind of a pictorial depiction of how it is. So instead of worrying much about the threat, it is kind of political as well at times to talk about threat and security issues more when we need to more focus on education and development. So that can be conflict, can be aggression, and less. So try and lessen the conflict. Our effort can be to build on this intellectual capital and build a stronger ANI. I'm not saying ANI will become Hong Kong or Dubai or anything like that. I think ANI will become ANI if it is smarter and faster. Thank you so much. Just a thought before I wrap up my bit. When I was asked to write about the chapter, the thought that came to my mind was almost 75 years ago, my grandparents were there in Andaman and Nicobar Islands in Kalapani, which was where our colonizers had built the jails for revolutionaries. 75 years later, as their grandson, if a speck of an idea comes to fruition, then probably that will bring some justice, not just to my ancestors, but also to my community, our community. ANI is the hotspot, much long neglected, and I think ANI should be focused now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Arjun Chatterjee. As they are online, do you have any questions so that you can ask them? Both are online, Dr. Subhrojit Kunwar and Mr. Arjun Chatterjee. Yeah. Okay, okay. So as they are online, they can just they will leave, so that if you have any questions, so that they can leave, and we can proceed for our next other paper presenters who are present here. Okay, thank you, Dr. Subhrojit Kunwar and Mr. Arjun Chatterjee for their paper presentations online. Thank you very much. Now we are just asking to our next paper presenter. So our next Sthapita Sutradhar and Borna Bonik, they are going to present a paper on climate change. Climate change, acknowledging the paradigm shift. Sthapita.
Good afternoon to one and all present here. Today, Borna Bonik, my co-author, and I, Sthapita Sutradhar, would be presenting the paper titled Climate Change, Acknowledging the Paradigm Shift. Without taking much time, I would request my co-author to come up here and throw some light on climate politics.
Yes. Well, it's evident that almost every issue that went to international level has become politicized in this way or that. So yes, how could they let go the climatic question? So climate politics simply means the tendencies, strategies, moves taken by international states to use climate as a weapon for sustaining or creating international dominance and own national interest over others. Now, climate politics has long been there, best understood through North-South dilemma. It originated from the question, who's going to take the responsibility of protecting climate, sacrificing its own developmental progress to limit carbon emission, of course. Global South, mostly developing countries, came up with arguments like the North and South haven't exploited the nature in the same way. So when it's the turn to pay the bill, why should it cut in half? So North should now give the chance to developing countries to develop by taking greater responsibility or restricting, taking greater responsibilities of restricting pollution, of course, developmental progress. And secondly, they say that the once colonizers who have drained all the wealth from the global south now should pay the bill. Now, this is one aspect, but the thing which is even more relevant and contemporary to Indo-Pacific region regarding the climate politics is the issue of neocolonialism in the name of financial assisting. It's again complained by the developing states that the major international powers always try to curtail sovereignty and make the poor developing states inferior to them in terms of fund. The climate funds come with conditions like GCF. The climate funds always come with the condition like GCF is given only if you have the technological ability to run the projects. Now, can we regard it just another pressure on developing countries to acquire technological advancement as soon as possible? Where the money will come from? Of course, it will come from IMF and World Bank, and the technologies will from West. Now, if we regard that the IMF, World Bank, West, interestingly, they are all accused of the neocolonialism. Anyway, to emphasize on this issue, the case of Maldives must be taken into account, which is an archipelago state in the Indo-Pacific region. We all know that Maldives is dying. The state's contribution to carbon emission is almost negligible, but what they are suffering is called the existential crisis. Now, aren't they getting funds? Yes, they are. But what the behavior they're getting as a package should also taken into account. Ex-Environment Minister of Maldives, Hussein Rashid Hassan, revealed that they had to beg the first world countries to access the funds to battle climate crisis. Current Environment Minister Amarnath Shauna has also showed dissatisfaction on the complex accessibility of the funds. Lastly, we must not forget that Maldives has the potential to make more than 5 lakhs refugees if it goes under sea. And if that happens, the issue will limit itself neither in the Pacific region, nor the politics will remain then in the climate sphere only. That will be much bigger.
So now we have also made sure to focus on another case study, that is of Ladakh. Ladakh is a non-legislative union territory which forms the greater part of Kashmir and has been subject to disputes between India, Pakistan and China since 1947. People of Ladakh are presently on the streets protesting against the inaction on part of the government for the political and environmental issues that they have been facing. It is important to note here that some of the climate-related issues like water scarcity and deterioration of environment due to excessive tourism is not unique to this region. Article 370 and the 6th schedule are pressing issues when it comes to Ladakh. The people of Ladakh hoped that after the Article 370 was scrapped, the administration in the region will improve and they will have better access to funds. But that has not been the case. The government also did not incorporate the 6th schedule in this region as it had promised earlier. The people are not in a position to regulate the funds coming into the state. People of Ladakh have been facing an employment crisis. The government had promised to secure 12 lakh jobs, but only 800 people have been recruited, and that too in the police department, which functions as the state's instrument for coercion. Sir Sonam Wangchuk has been trying to highlight these issues through his peaceful hunger strike, but he has been ill-treated by the state's police and put under house arrest. It is important to remember that it was Sir Wangchuk who helped India beat China in its own game by promoting unique economic development models and urging Indians to rely lesser on China for their necessities. Ladakh is geopolitically very important for India. India is a major power in the Indo-Pacific region, and its internal security can be threatened through China's intervention in the Ladakh region.
Sapita, just conclude. Just main points, conclude.
Okay, so we have also discussed about the Rohingya issue in our paper, wherein we highlight how they have turned into a national, social and environmental threat. Both people have been facing several crises, and if we go on to talk about them, it is an endless discussion, needless to say. Due to the influx of the Rohingya refugees, Bangladesh has been suffering economically. Their tourism industry has been suffering greatly. However, I would like to move on to solutions as of now, and I would ask Borna to, yes, highlight the solutions.
So we are living in 2023 where our life is so busy and we don't have really time to stop, look around the awareness posters and all. So why not we try to seek the attention from the leisure time? And here lies the idea of cinematography. There is no lack of movie lovers either in the Pacific or in the world. So the reasons why we should encourage cinematography to create awareness are firstly, it's an audiovisual aid which can seek attention in the most effective way, and secondly, a huge audience can be targeted through the medium of their own choice. We all have heard about CSR or corporate social responsibilities. So why not introduce something like film industry social social responsibilities, which will make compulsion on production houses to make a movie on climate issues. Again, to escape lack of sincerity, mechanical boring script writing, and the mentality of fulfilling the legal responsibilities only, a separate category of prestigious award reserved for only films on climate may also be formed.
Yes, we have also discussed how we can utilize the gaming industry, clothing industry, and the fashion industry for bringing about climate awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Stapita and Borna. Just you prepared so well that you could have get enough time to present all these things. Thank you for a good attempt. Stapita Sutradhar and Borna Bonik. Now I would call Prasanna Paul and Oishiki Chaudhary to present their paper, Governing Intercontinental Ships, Geostrategic Relevance and Socio-Cultural Interplay. Just make your main points.
Greetings of the day. I am Prasanna Paul. I co-wrote this paper with Oishiki Chaudhary. The title of our paper is Gauging Intercontinental Shifts, Geostrategic Relevance and Socio-Cultural Interplay. The Indo-Pacific has undoubtedly become a focal point in strategic and commercial exchanges globally. In the current era of technological transformation, the permeation of global borders by linkages beyond the physical is reshaping traditional concepts of not only rivalry. The continued existence of diasporas is a key element in the proliferation of social ties across borders, pertaining to culture, belonging, as well as the ideas of community and becoming. Through this paper, the authors attempt to contextualize the attested fluidity of borders in the Indo-Pacific as a natural consequence of pre-existing indigenous ties which flourished before the colonial invasion, and aims to illustrate the scope for their revitalization as a potential or geostrategic confluence. For the purpose of this paper, the term Indo-Pacific has been used to describe a region that stretches from the eastern coast of Africa to the western coast of the United States, encompassing the Indian Ocean and the Western and Central Pacific Ocean. India's cultural and historical linkages with the Indo-Pacific region can be traced back to ancient times. The region already had bustling trade networks that connected to China and Middle East, and over time, this led to an exchange of ideas and cultural practices that had a profound impact on the region. Migration, along with trade, are important in leading to the movement of people across the region that has led to the establishment of communities and networks of people who share common cultures, languages, and tradition, a crucial role in preserving and promoting the region's cultural heritage and in fostering understanding and cooperation between the region's diverse communities, which have provided a basis for people-to-people diplomacy, which have also been a key driver of regional integration. In recent years, digital technology has also emerged as an important tool for promoting socio-cultural interactions and people-to-people linkages in the Indo-Pacific region and on common goals. The region is also home to some of the world's most important ports, including Singapore, Mumbai, and Shanghai. Given the region's economic and strategic importance, major powers have been increasingly focusing on the Indo-Pacific in their foreign policy. The dilemmas of inclusion and exclusion are inevitable in the formulation of definitions of strategic constructs. But what is important is that the Indo-Pacific region is, with respect to antiquity, a crucial and time-tested area of collaboration. Our aim through this paper has been to connect the threads of commonality that already exist between the people in this region. with the central assumption that human societies are built on that one cultural thing, connection. We would not go so far as to say historical contestations or ethnic conflict in the region are to be taken lightly. We mean that if investigated deep enough, culture has the often unimaginable metaphysical stability to unite in curious ways. Commonalities ranging from the mundane and semantic to physical and manifestations of historical grandeur and opulence of empires and contained within the infinite realities. I would like to conclude by quoting Amartya Sen, which says, there is the more basic issue of the individuality of each culture and questions about whether and how this individuality can be respected and valued even though the world grows steadily smaller and more uniform. We live at a time when ideas and practices spread across boundaries of countries and regions with great rapidity, and the possibility that something extremely important is being lost in this process of integration aroused understandable concern. And yet cultural interactions, even in a world of deep inequalities, can also create space for creative innovations which combine constructions with vulnerabilities. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prasanna, for completing on time. So, this was the panel of young scholars. I thank all the young scholars of this panel. All they have made a good attempt and timely completed. So with these words, I should end this panel. Now next, I would call Urbi, Das for vote of thanks. Ma'am?
I just wanted to say a few words. Like,
Okay. Sure.
firstly, both the panels, there's very few in the audience, just both the panels that the young scholars that we heard, like, I was amazed at the selection of the topics. Like, there's so much you can do with Indo-Pacific, but like, I used to think that, I've got sick because we did this Andaman thing, and then we had the first lecture, the second lecture, but like the nuances that they have discovered and explored in the papers are really amazing. So I really want to congratulate this group of young people. And as Iman mentioned earlier, we're really looking to publish a second book with your articles in it. So really great. One thing I would want to say to the group which presented IUU, your paper and article are assuming will have the full form, but when you introduce it, like, do give a full form of IUU. And this goes for all abbreviations that you use in your articles, at least for the first usage, give the full form, because the person sitting next to me here is a layman. She didn't know what IUU was. So never assume that the audience will know as much as you do. So always make sure that you let it know. Thank you.
No, I just want to thank the entire team, because I know that it's a very long program happening for 3 days in different parts. So thank you everybody for supporting us, and British Geopolitical Commission for supporting this particular conference. And Sanjana, she deserves a special thanks, because for the last 2-3 months she's reading all the proof. First time, second time, third time, 4 times, and she's just taking the proof very minutely. And thank you, Sanjana, for supporting us. And also Rabo, he's not here today, but he's very close to us that way, and he's also very meticulous about everything, because it's a team that does work. Of course, Urbi has done a lot, because she has coordinated on behalf of the department the entire program, starting from the program list and what will happen. And not but the least, Devoshi, Toidul, and of course Vaishik, then Priya, and Deep, and she's sitting there, Suchishmita. Now you're awake, I guess. So Suchishmita is sitting in the right corner, and they really worked hard. And the team is really very interesting. And Olakanam is also sitting beside this, and of course our technical team, because we are not a technical team. This is a very right. And that's what we do normally, Aditya. This is the program that we are going to organize. These are the logos reframing the logos, then making the posters, uh, uh, publicity, everything has been done by Ritesh, under the leadership of Ritesh, and you really, really deserve a special thank, Ritesh, for this. And one of our programs, and only thing in him is that everything is positive and nothing negative in Ritesh. So every time you say something, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, late at night at 2 in the morning, we don't sleep normally. So that is the problem. That is the problem. And after that, sometimes when you think of going back to jungle, then Ritesh is there. Okay sir, I am managing everything, don't worry about that. So thank you Ritesh for this support. And of course, Aditya, it is your mentorship that you guided us to have a very, very strong academic discussion, because it was your decision that you have decided to make something academic, to come out with something academic. And of course, that so many teachers, Ramondal is here, of our department has written in the book, including some young scholars who are working in the field. And secondly, so many students are interested. Many of them could not present a paper today because our exams are going on. In different phases, exams are going on, classes are off, but many of the students stand up today for this. And I'm hopeful that on 28th and 29th of April, we are again having Asia-Pacific Conference with Indian Council of World Affairs, British Deputy High Commission, Indian Chamber of Commerce, and Observer Research Foundation. And what we're planning, we can plan that we can organize one day in Calcutta and the other day at Shantiniketan, because this is Indo-Pacific, and we can include the Chinar Haven into it. So we are thinking in that way, that we'll discuss later on. And our book release program is there. So thanks a lot. Thank you very much for everything.
After giving so many thanks, still we have someone to give you thanks. Urvi Das, Assistant Professor of our Department of International Relations.
No, Professor Lahiri thanked everybody, but we have to thank him. So a big round of applause to Professor Lahiri for making this program possible. Okay. And everything is a teamwork. So I would like to thank my entire team and the department for this program to be success. And also the British High Commission, Kolkata. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's all possible because of our head. We have such a beautiful head. You know, he makes everything possible. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Please join us for a cup of tea. Okay.